She helped the old janitor fix his tablet. The next morning, he owned the company. The rain fell softly over downtown Chicago, turning the city lights into blurred rivers of gold and silver across the pavement. Most of the employees inside Crestline Design Group had already gone home, escaping the storm with tired smiles and hurried phone calls. The massive 23-story building slowly emptied floor by floor until only silence remained. Except on the 19th floor. A single desk lamp still glowed near the eastern windows. Emma Carter leaned over a spread of blueprints, rubbing her tired eyes. At 29, she had already learned that talent alone meant very little in the world of architecture. Crestline was one of the most prestigious firms in the country, famous for designing luxury skyscrapers and futuristic city centers. But behind the polished presentations and expensive suits lived a culture built on exhaustion. Emma knew that culture well. For 3 years, she had stayed late, fixed other people's mistakes, and watched senior architects take credit for her ideas during meetings she wasn't invited to attend. Yet she stayed, because every paycheck mattered. Her younger brother Noah needed specialized therapy after a spinal injury 2 years earlier, and the mounting medical bills had quietly swallowed every dream Emma once had for herself. She glanced toward the clock on her monitor. 11:43 p.m. The office was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and distant thunder rolling over the city. Emma stretched her sore shoulders and reached for her coffee mug, only to realize it was empty. She sighed and stood, grabbing her cardigan before walking toward the break room. As she passed the darker section near the archive room, she noticed movement. An elderly janitor stood near one of the drafting tables beneath a dim overhead light. Emma had seen him before. Quiet, thin, gray-haired. He always worked nights. Most employees barely acknowledged him. Some didn't even know his name. Tonight, however, something seemed wrong. The old man was hunched over a cracked tablet, staring intensely at the screen. Several digital blueprints were open, but his hands trembled as he tapped anxiously through folders. No. Where did it go? He muttered under his breath. He looked distressed. Emma slowed her steps. The janitor adjusted his old glasses, frustration tightening across his weathered face. He pressed the screen again, but the tablet froze. "Oh, come on," he whispered. Emma noticed a thick black notebook resting beside him, filled with handwritten sketches and notes. Curious, she approached gently. "Excuse me, sir." The old man startled slightly, almost dropping the tablet. "I'm sorry," Emma said quickly. "I didn't mean to scare you." He exhaled slowly. "It's all right." Up close, Emma noticed how exhausted he looked. Deep lines framed his face, and his hands carried the roughness of years of labor. "I'm Emma," she said softly. The old man nodded once. "Walter." She glanced at the frozen screen. "Having trouble?" Walter looked embarrassed. "It's nothing." "It doesn't look like nothing." He hesitated before quietly admitting, "I'm trying to recover a project file. I must have pressed something wrong." Emma smiled faintly. Technology has a habit of punishing people for breathing incorrectly. To her surprise, Walter chuckled. It was small but genuine. "I suppose it does." Emma pulled out a chair. "May I?" Walter studied her carefully before sliding the tablet toward her. Emma tapped through the folders. The device was ancient, slow, barely functional. "What exactly are you looking for?" Walter pointed toward a folder labeled Riverside Civic Project. Emma paused. She recognized the name immediately. It was Crestline's biggest upcoming proposal, a multi-billion-dollar urban redevelopment contract that every major architecture firm in the state was competing for. "How do you have access to this?" she asked before she could stop herself. Walter's eyes lowered. "I clean the executive conference rooms," he replied carefully. "Sometimes people leave things open." Emma nodded slowly. That made sense. Still, something about him felt unusual. Most janitors didn't study advanced architectural layouts after midnight. Walter watched nervously as Emma restored the corrupted folder and reorganized the scattered files. "There," she said after a few minutes. "Everything's back." Walter stared at the recovered blueprints like someone watching a miracle unfold. "You fixed it. It just needed patience." He looked down at the notebook beside him. You know, he said quietly, most people become angry when old men don't understand modern systems. Emma shrugged lightly. My dad used to struggle with smartphones. He once spent 2 hours trying to answer a FaceTime call using the TV remote. Walter laughed again, this time louder. The sound echoed warmly through the empty office. Emma noticed tears briefly shine in his eyes before he looked away. People move too fast now, Walter murmured. They forget how humiliating it feels to fall behind. Emma leaned back in her chair. Maybe the world moves too fast, she replied. Not the people. Walter looked at her differently after that. Not like a janitor speaking to an employee. Like a teacher hearing something important from a student. Thunder rumbled outside. Emma stood. You should probably head home soon, she said. The storm's getting worse. Walter closed the notebook carefully. Yes, he said softly. Perhaps things will look clearer tomorrow. Emma smiled politely before walking away. She never noticed Walter watching her long after she disappeared around the corner. The next morning, Crestline Design Group buzzed with tension. Something big was happening. Executives rushed through hallways whispering urgently, while assistants carried stacks of folders toward the executive boardroom. Emma blinked. What founder? Melissa looked shocked. You seriously don't know? Emma shook her head. Daniel Mercer. Melissa whispered dramatically. The man who built Crestline from nothing. Emma vaguely recognized the name. Mercer had retired nearly 15 years earlier after becoming one of the most respected architects in America. Rumors about him had become almost mythical inside the company. He disappeared after retirement. Melissa continued. Nobody's seen him in years. Okay, and apparently he's choosing the company's new managing partner himself. Now Emma understood the panic. At Crestline, becoming managing partner was like inheriting a kingdom. Melissa leaned closer. Everyone says he's ruthless. Emma glanced toward the executive offices. Senior architects were practically sprinting through the hallways. She sighed quietly. Another day of people pretending to be important. Around noon, the entire company was summoned to the main lobby. Employees gathered in nervous clusters beneath the towering glass ceiling. Emma stood near the back. Then the elevators opened. Silence swept across the room. An elderly man stepped out, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His silver hair was neatly combed back. His posture radiated calm authority. Emma's breath caught. Walter, the janitor. No, not Walter. Daniel Mercer, the founder of Crestline Design Group. Shock rippled through the lobby like electricity. Executives immediately rushed forward with exaggerated smiles. Mr. Mercer, welcome back. We're honored to have you here, sir. But Daniel barely acknowledged them. Instead, his eyes scanned the crowd quietly, searching. Then they landed on Emma. The entire room watched as the legendary founder walked straight past the senior executives toward the junior architect, standing silently in the back. Emma froze. Daniel stopped before her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, to everyone's disbelief, Daniel Mercer extended his hand. Good morning, Emma. The room exploded into whispers. Emma stared at him. You? Daniel smiled gently. Thank you for helping an old janitor. Nearby executives looked horrified. One senior partner nearly dropped his coffee. Emma's face burned with confusion. I didn't know who you were. I know, Daniel replied softly. That's why it mattered. The next few days transformed Crestline completely. Daniel didn't stay hidden in executive offices. Instead, he observed. Quietly, carefully. He attended project meetings unannounced. He sat beside interns during lunch. He spoke to receptionists longer than vice presidents. And slowly, uncomfortable truths surfaced. Employees who once barked at assistants suddenly became polite. Managers who ignored support staff now smiled awkwardly at janitors. Fear spread through the upper ranks. Because Daniel wasn't evaluating architecture. He was evaluating character. Emma tried to avoid attention, but it became impossible. Daniel requested her presence in nearly every strategic session. At first, executives assumed she was simply assisting. Then came the Riverside presentation, Crestline's largest project. The conference room overflowed with investors and board members. Emma sat quietly near the back while senior architect Richard Hale presented his flashy redesign proposal filled with impossible cost estimates and glamorous visuals. The board applauded politely. Then Daniel spoke. "Emma," he said calmly, "what do you think?" The room stiffened. Richard's smile faltered. Emma hesitated. "I don't think the proposal works." Silence. Richard stared at her like she had committed suicide. Daniel nodded once. "Explain." Emma slowly stood. Her heart pounded. But as she looked around the room, she remembered the old man struggling alone with his tablet in the empty office. She remembered kindness, patience, dignity. So she spoke honestly. "The design is beautiful," Emma said carefully, "but it ignores the actual people who will live there." She walked toward the screen. "These neighborhoods already have communities, schools, elderly residents, local businesses. This proposal displaces thousands of people while pretending to modernize their lives." Several board members exchanged glances. Emma continued, "Architecture isn't just about impressive skylines. It's about building spaces where human beings can belong." Richard interrupted sharply. "With all due respect, emotional thinking doesn't win billion-dollar contracts." Emma met his gaze calmly. "No, but ignoring humanity destroys cities." Daniel smiled faintly. For the first time in years, someone inside Crestline had spoken about people instead of profit margins. And everyone in the room felt it. That evening, Daniel asked Emma to join him for dinner. Not at some luxurious restaurant. At a small family-owned diner near the river. Rain tapped softly against the windows as waitresses moved between tables carrying plates of steaming food. Daniel stirred his coffee quietly. "You know why I became a janitor after retirement?" he asked. Emma shook her head. "Because I wanted to know what kind of company Crestline had become when nobody important was watching." Emma listened silently. Daniel looked tired suddenly. "When I founded this company, we designed affordable housing, community libraries, public parks. We believed architecture should serve ordinary people." His voice softened sadly. "Somewhere along the way, success hollowed us out." Emma glanced down. "That happens to a lot of companies." "Yes," Daniel replied, "but it also happens to people." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel smiled gently. "You reminded me that goodness still exists here." Emma felt tears sting unexpectedly behind her eyes. Nobody had ever spoken to her that way before. Not as a resource, not as an employee, as a person. Weeks passed. Under Daniel's leadership, Crestline slowly changed. Workshops replaced intimidation. Junior employees were finally heard. Veteran staff were treated with renewed respect instead of being quietly pushed aside. And Emma rose naturally into leadership, not because she demanded power, because people trusted her. Even Richard Hale eventually approached her one evening after a meeting. "I misjudged you," he admitted awkwardly. Emma smiled slightly. "You misjudged a lot of people." Richard gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "Fair enough." Meanwhile, Daniel's health quietly worsened. Emma noticed it first. The coughing, the fatigue, the way he sometimes paused mid-conversation as if gathering strength. One evening, she found him alone in the archive room, staring at old company blueprints. "You should go home," she said gently. Daniel smiled weakly. "I spent my whole life building towers," he murmured. "Funny thing is, in the end, the only thing people truly remember is how you treated them inside those buildings." Emma sat beside him quietly. Daniel looked toward her. "When I'm gone, protect this place from becoming cold again." Her throat tightened. "You're not going anywhere." Daniel chuckled softly. "That's kind of you to say." But they both knew the truth. 6 months later, Crestline unveiled the completed Riverside Civic Project. Not a luxury development. A human-centered urban community with affordable housing, green public spaces, local business grants, and accessible transit systems. The presentation received international praise. But the proudest moment for Emma came during opening day. An elderly maintenance worker struggled with a new digital scheduling system near the lobby desk. Several executives walked past without noticing. Before Emma could move, one of the company's younger architects sat beside the man patiently. "Take your time," the young architect said warmly. "We'll figure it out together." Emma smiled quietly. Daniel's lessons had survived. not through speeches, through people. Months later, after Daniel Mercer passed peacefully in his sleep, the company gathered for a private memorial inside Crestline's main atrium. No giant statues were unveiled. No dramatic corporate ceremony. Only stories. Stories from interns, receptionists, engineers, cleaning staff. People who remembered being treated like human beings by a man powerful enough to ignore them, but kind enough not to. At the end of the memorial, Emma walked alone through the quiet office floors. Near the archive room, she noticed something resting on an old drafting table. Daniel's black notebook. Inside its cover, written carefully in faded ink, was a final message. A building stands because every small piece carries weight. So does a human life. Emma closed the notebook slowly. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the evening rain. And somewhere deep within the towering glass walls of Crestline Design Group, kindness remained part of the foundation forever.